And good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde from Moncton, New Brunswick. It's 15 degrees and sunny, and we're only a few days away from golf season. So my mood will be changing and be getting better and better as the weeks approaches for the first tee off. Having said that, thank you very much for the invite. Thank you very much, Chris, for reaching out. And you know, I have a bad habit still after all these years away from politics. When someone calls and says, Camille, do you want to speak? And usually I say yes. But the problem is then when you start preparing for these things, you wonder what the hell are you doing by accepting this journey in the afternoon that we're having? Because in English, I have a hard time pronouncing the word platformization. Can you imagine that I don't know too much about it? So technology and platformization is not the strength that I bring to the table today. It's probably not the strength that I brought to the table in the credit union space. However, I think when I hear about credit union members, credit union influencers, CEOs wanting to get together to change, then there's some energy that comes to my body, because I think people that it's very, very important that as a system we do change. So this is my first public intervention since leaving the credit union, talking to a group of people from the system. I left 4 years ago, close to, as you know, and over those 14 years as CEOs, I've met some of the best employees, the most intelligent people, the most devoted volunteers. And, you know, I was lucky. I've had a few good gigs during my career, but none better than being CEO of Uni Financial, and none better than being part of the credit union system. So I only ask one thing of you today, that you remember of the conversations that I will have with you. And please remember, after all it's done, just remember one thing. Those of you who don't change won't survive. Those of you who don't change won't survive. Because the world is changing fast. The pandemic over the last year has changed the way we're doing things, and it will continue to force us to do things like we have never done them before. And if we can't do that, I will tell you right away that your members will not be there with you for the long run. Members are less loyal. Members shop around. You know, when I look at a statistic that from October to January, 45% of Canadians between the age of 24 to 44 years old travel on websites, on financial institutions' website. So the question I have for you is that a challenge for you, or is this a great opportunity that we have as individual credit unions and as a system? You know, are the people visiting websites? Are they visiting your websites, or are they visiting our competitors' website? You know, that's the question that you have to ask, and not to disappoint you. I would say that they are visiting all financial services websites, and they will go where they are better accompanied, because people today understand their finances better than they have ever before. They've had the time over the last year to study, to understand, and knowing more and more what they need to do to better plan their future. You know, as much as I am excited about the possibilities, there's something in me that really, really bothers me. I was there for 14 years, and there was a lot of journeys that as CEO and as board and as employees, we went on. But because of the way we're structured, because of our governance, it's never easy to achieve anything in the Canadian credit union system. And we can leave here today with the best intentions, with the best plan. But when we go back to our individual credit unions, what will happen? Will it be another deception? Will it be another lost opportunity? You know, the system, our system is, when I think and talk about the system, I'm not really sure what I'm talking about. What is the system? Who speaks for the credit union system in Canada? Is it the large credit union CEOs? Is it the chair of the boards? Is it the centrals? Is it the CEOs of the centrals, I should say? Is it CCUA, who's caught in the middle of a quagmire, being forced to do things for federal credit unions, for small credit unions, for large credit unions? And you know, when I was in politics, what I enjoyed the most is when an organization came to see me at my office, and they would tell me, all of our system is behind this. All the municipalities of New Brunswick are behind this. And then they'd go, and I say to my staff, don't worry, guys. What they were telling us, body language was totally different. And then you make 2 or 3 calls to people in the municipalities, and you know darn right that they were not supporting there, but they were forced to attend. So I think it's very, very, very important that that we take time while we look at platforms, that we also take time to look at our structures, because I think some days that our structures are built to fail. And that's I'm very nervous about that, because our competition are maybe not built to fail. They're built to pivot. They're built to be more efficient, and they're built to better service members. You know, when I did the major project at uni, when we merged credit unions, we got rid of a central, we got rid of the STAB fund. And you know, what really surprised me thinking back of these discussions, but you know what the people around the tables were talking about? They were talking about, well, who is going to be on the board? What's going to be the name of the new organization? They were talking about who will be the CEO. Are we going to have a deal that one's going to retire soon, he'll stay a few years, and all of that? And then finally, in the end, they'd say, what will this do for our members? And today, I'm glad to hear that we're talking about platformization. What will it do for our members? And that's got to be your focus. So I'm at around 7 or 8 minutes from what I see here, and I want to make sure that I stick to under 10 minutes. But you have a choice. The credit union system has a choice. You have a choice to lead, or you have a choice to follow. You have a choice to take the road less traveled, or you have a choice to stay on the bumpy road that you're on right now. Those will be very, very difficult decisions. Those will be heart-gutching discussions that you will need to have. But if we don't have them, we will not stand a chance. So I end like I started and remind you, those of you who don't change will not survive. Thank you.
Good day to all of you. It's great to meet you. It's quite impressive to see you all in the credit union ecosystem coming together to discuss the topic at hand. What I'll try to do in the coming, I think, give or take 8.5 minutes, is to give you the perspective from a platform vendor, a global platform vendor. Whereas myself personally, I've been in this space for 7 years, and I've been, let's say, talking about these topics and seeing the fruits of digital transformation for many of these years. I wanted to first relate to a few statements that were shared to me in the briefing. And in the briefing, it mentioned the following. Platformization of finance is a state change. And also mentioned we need to be where our members are on their journeys. I think both of these statements actually are very powerful. And in my mind, you can capture it in one of the statements from Andreessen Horowitz, which was a statement he made in 2011. This is almost 10 years ago. And he basically made the blunt statement, software is eating the world. And this is where the platformization era actually kicked off. Whereas with software is eating the world, he basically said every, let's say, daily capability you use in your life, whether it's by now using your phone for listening to music, for looking at your favorite series, for doing your daily shopping, pretty much every vertical, which we would call vertical, but every activity that you have in your daily life is being ran by platforms. If I need to take a simple taxi when I'm traveling, I just use Uber wherever I am in the world. If I want to get my food delivered to my door, I similarly use Uber Eats or Deliveroo or any other of these players. If you think about it, you basically see a whole set of platform players that simply leverage the platform approach and platform technologies to get an incredible economy of scale. And through digital technology, basically have a global blueprint or a global go-to-market, but apply it super locally. And we're all extremely familiar with it, because I cannot imagine that the few hundred people here in the call today are not using these types of platform provider capabilities. Now, towards that statement, that's basically where digital transformation has really started in the world. And we're all very familiar with it. Interestingly enough, the digital transformation wave has been relatively slowish in the financial industry, pretty slowish. So 7 years ago, when I was doing my first pitches as a vendor, as a platform vendor, we literally had to educate everyone in the financial space to understand that this wave was coming and that this impact was inevitable and you would need to make a change over time. With some banks in those years, we had some innovators, we had some early adopters, and they jumped into the moment at that moment in time, and they're doing extremely well today. Let's fast forward. Where we are today, it's a very interesting moment in time. Because of course, the paradigm shift is, I don't need to educate anyone here in the conversation. I think the call to arms is there. The sense of urgency is very significant. It is now more about why are we here and how do we maneuver out of it? What are the options, if you will? And that's what I hope to share with you in the coming few minutes still. One part to the equation is that expectations have dramatically changed. And they have dramatically changed because of the applications and the experiences that I was just alluding to. Whether it's the hyper-personalized experience with Netflix, whether it's Spotify that's generating playlists that are just only for myself, for Tim, and somehow Spotify is able to educate me with new music, new genres, new artists, and I'm significantly impressed every other week. That is the benchmark. Zoom is also the benchmark. By now, we are completely okay to run a pretty intense session for 2 hours over a platform like Zoom. It's the new normal. So that has basically trickled over aggressively into the fintech space, into the financial industry, and also into the credit union ecosystem. And by now, especially also during the COVID pandemic, 3 years of change, 3 years of digital adoption have been squashed into 1 year. And these are statistics from McKinsey, which we recently got our hands on. So basically, we have to really make a move, right? The moment is now. And in doing so, it's all about how do you do this in a way that you get scale and that you can actually digest the activity that you need to go through to really leverage digital in favor of your execution and not as a byproduct or, let's say, a quick move you need to make to duct tape a certain set of capabilities that you might have. That brings me to my second point. The second point is that the beauty of the credit union ecosystem is that you are member first. It is literally how you're founded. There are a gazillion of challenger banks out there, neobanks, but also bigger institutions and mid-sized institutions that claim they are customer first, but in essence, they are more top line first or shareholder first. Whereas with credit unions, I would say the differentiation is incredible because you are truly set up to serve your population, to support your community. And that directly connects to the mission that we are on already for more than a decade, helping you become the institution that your members love. And by love, I'm not saying the cheesy, oh, I really love this institution for, no, they love your institution, but also the capability that you bring to the table because you're helping them in their daily lives. If I talk about daily life, I talk about simple things like, for instance, taking an Uber at an airport, or ordering food because I have a busy evening, or looking at my favorite entertainment show in any type of device, wherever I am, even when I'm traveling. It boils down to those basics. And for us, it also boils down to those basics in finance. So basically, I want to help any of the members to do their daily finances in a very simple, seamless, and frictionless way, making them more financially successful. And doing so throughout the full life cycle of a member, that's where the opportunity is, right? It doesn't end with a flashy application and potentially a digital platform below it. It really starts with a fundamental change in your operating model. And with that, what I'm trying to say is that digital, and for instance, working with a vendor like Backbase or anyone else out there, it is not a project. It is your digital operating model. It's your business model. In essence, it is your future, because digital is here to stay, and it will only become more, let's say, extreme in how your members are expecting to be served. Now, having said that, a few words about platform and how we usually look at the world. The reason why a platform is impactful and important in the discussion for today is what you would like to prevent is going for point solutions. Like, let's go for a quick mobile app over here, or maybe do a quick web application over there, or maybe let's rebuild everything that we have already in our ecosystem. There is no time to do so. So the propensity to either self-build or to go for a one-off application, or let's say touch point that you can get into your ecosystem, those days are honestly bygone. You have to make a big move where indeed, with the potential of leveraging a platform, you can still start small, but you at least have the fabric and the infrastructure in place on top of which you can start to innovate. And of course, if I talk about on top, it's about functionalities, it's about capabilities, but it's also about lines of business. So for instance, you could very well start with onboarding, making a very seamless onboarding experience happen on the mobile channel or web and mobile. And from there onwards, go to a more complete scope over time, and maybe even also introduce over time small, medium enterprise banking, if you're looking at those types of members. So what I'm trying to say here is that the trick that I see work globally, if we talk about platformization, is to go for a solid infrastructure with a complete operating model around it, which literally talks about managed hosting, application lifecycle management, all the topics that you typically do not want to do in-house. Get those fundamentals in place, and on top of that, start differentiating and start leveraging what is already out there in the ecosystem with any vendor of choice out there that will allow you to leapfrog, to come at a neutral level with whatever is happening in the ecosystem already, with the neobanks, the challenger banks like Revolut and Chime and Current and others, but also directly facing bigger players out there like Goldman Sachs and others. With a platform approach and with a solution-focused approach that can scale out over time, you can literally, with your complete ecosystem, come together and accelerate from there. Of course, I'm not neglecting the fact that it needs alignment, it needs synergy, it needs a vision. As a technology vendor, we are not here to, let's say, give you the vision for your ecosystem. Not at all. That's not what I'm claiming. What I am claiming, though, is that a significant part of the answer is digital. It has to be a platform to reach economies of scale and to accelerate over time. And basically, I'm trying to say here as well that it is not a project. It is literally a paradigm shift, which we've been helping institutions with already for more than a decade.
Good afternoon or good morning, everybody. So I'm very much excited what I heard from Tim, because the starting of my presentation is pretty much the same, maybe from a different angle, but what you can recognize that the world is changing, and it's very easy to notice the changes when you are outside of the change, and whenever you're inside the process, it gets even more tricky. So a thing goes as usual, and it's boiling a bit and a bit and a bit, and suddenly we're popping up in an absolutely different situation. It's like an example with the mobile phones. So they were bigger, they were big, then they're getting smaller, smaller, smaller. Then there is a screen, and then suddenly we're realizing that there is a device where you can distribute unique video content and talk to every single customer, as well as these customers continuously looking in the devices, looking if somebody's writing to him. So if I will tell you that 20 years ago, you won't believe, but that's the reality, and it's kind of for us as things as usual, but they absolutely not. So in nearest history, we have seen several things which I can call critical inventions. Sure, like invention in a very small area twisted the whole paradigm and twisted the whole things and the industries and everything. So that was like invention of electricity or invention of the internal combustion engine. So I have an assumption that the ecosystems is potentially our new critical invention. And like Tim said, you like it or you don't like it, but you cannot neglect it, and you have to understand what you're going to do there. So whenever we're talking about ecosystems, and I know there is a lot of fuss about that, and everybody's saying ecosystem, platform, marketplace, and we're all using the same words, but at the same time, we're all meaning absolutely different. And if you look at the comments, you can see that exactly. So my approach is very simple. The typical mistakes that people are doing, they're thinking that the ecosystem or platform is an IT system, which in my world is wrong, because whenever you're talking about the ecosystem, it's all about the business logic, which brings the participants into ecosystem, which make them more beneficial to stay inside rather than outside. And that's defined by a business logic of ecosystem. And yes, you will need a technology, and that's going to be an enabler, where you're talking about the IT instruments and some other instruments as well. But whenever you're talking about ecosystem as such, the first thing you need to focus at is the business logic, and you don't need to think about the instruments before you understood and check that the business logic is actually working as you are planning to have it. So then when you're talking about the business logic of ecosystems, you have two big differences or two different approaches. So you can choose to build it based on a closed business systems or on the open business systems. Here's the simple example. So there are two samples of a sea life. The one is a closed system. So carefully selected participants locked into something which is closed and not changing with the environment change. And there is another example of the sea life where you still have the ecosystem, but there are it's addressing infinite number of participants, some of them coming, some of them going, but they continuously changing, and that allows the open ecosystem to adapt, to be much more adaptive to a changing environment. If you look at a bit more formal, you can find out that the closed systems, they are by definition, they're most efficient at the moment when they were originated. And then if you're looking in the time frame and then you try to understand the efficiency of the system, it will continuously decline just because the system is closed, the environment is changing. So that means that these pre-selected, carefully selected participants are less and less matching the changing environment. The open system works pretty much different. So it can be very inefficient at the beginning, but there will be a moment in time because it addresses everybody who we believe qualified. Then there will be a moment in time where there will be a match between the participants and the environment, and the efficiency of the system will drastically grow. The most interesting thing happens, what happens here, if, for example, we have a drastic change of environment, like we experienced last year with COVID, or with some breakthrough technology, or some changes with the regulation. So the closed system is going to decline faster, simply because now environment changed even more drastically. The open system will act differently. First, it will drop in efficiency because the current participants are not reflecting the best match with the environment, but because it's open, it's allowing everybody to step in, then it will regain its efficiency very quickly and will rebalance. So in a very, let's say, mathematical language, whenever we're talking about the open business systems, we're talking about the business systems with the self-balancing business systems with a positive feedback. So to make it very clear, life is not black and white. So whenever we're talking about the open and closed systems, there are very rare examples where we have a absolutely closed or absolutely open system. But whenever we're talking about the systems, they might be a bit more open or a bit more closed. Like, for example, if you take the ecosystem of Apple and Google, from developer perspective, they're both open systems, but if you look carefully into the rules, you will find out that the business logic of Apple actually declared much more closed system than the Google. So it's all about the shades of gray, not about black and white. And I want to give you a very simple explanation why the whole thing is going to appear in every single part of our life, and will cover absolutely every industry. So imagine the starting situation where we have a market which is a combination of the players of a different scale, and they're in a certain equilibrium, and the thing goes as usual. And then what's happening if somewhere here in the last part of the tail, there will be an initially originated ecosystem which allow the participants to gain the efficiency during the collaboration. So two things happening. One is the virtual player of the larger size is happening because they two are separate, but they acting as a one bigger scale member. And then we have a cutoff line, and whatever is on the right has a very unfortunate future. So they have two options. Either one, they have to disappear because their purchasing price or their cost price is higher than the selling price of this new virtual player, or they just entering the ecosystem. So when they enter in the ecosystem, the bigger the virtual player gains the scale, and then the cutoff line start moving. So the end state is very simple. So in the, let's say, pretty much every market will have the situation where we have number one, number two, maybe number three player, and then player number four, which will be actually not a real player, but it's going to be a virtual player, which is consistent of lots of small participants. So then what's going to happen if we have a drastic change in the environment? So number one is closed system, number two is closed system, number three is closed system, number four is open system. So number four, as a virtual player, so the community of those small players have much more opportunities to be flexible and adaptive when you're talking about the changes on the environment. And funny enough, whenever you have a competition between one and two, the competition is very simple. So number two going to the customers of number one and saying, look, whatever number one is offering you minus 5% is my offer. And that works pretty well because there are a lot of large customers there. But whenever those players want to compete with a virtual player, they literally have to go to every single small customer, and they don't have resources for that, they don't have appetite for that, and they don't have qualification for that. And the life not becomes very easy in this case. So I want to share with you one example, which I was sharing with Jasmine when we were talking about independence versus efficiency. And typically, whenever I have those kind of discussions, it's like says either or. So either you stay independent, but you are not efficient enough, or you gain in the efficiency, but you have to betray your identity and your independency. So I have a case study in Russia, which I was involved in consulting. So there was we're talking about the non-food retail in drogery, and there is a very big player, number one by far, and there are number two and number three, they are much more smaller. So those independent small players decided to make a union, which brought them to a cumulative revenue of $800 million, which made them comparable with number one. Funny enough, they were so big that their revenue was comparable with the revenue of L'Oreal or the revenue of other FMCG manufacturers. So they were unifying 1,500 points of sale, and they have jointly product development, joint purchasing, shared infrastructure, and resource pooling. So they were acting towards the customer as an independent players, but on the back end, they have a kind of a unified back end, or more or less just acting as the same company. So what was the outcome of that? They were independent, and at the same time, they're efficient. So you don't need to choose between the independence or efficiency. You just can get both if you're building an open system. And to illustrate that, I just picked up a small video. So there is no way, there is no reason to trade between independency and efficiency. You can do both. And that's why I love the word competition, which means cooperation plus competition. And based on my experience, I can say that it's not a magic anymore. So there are frameworks, and I have developed a framework which actually creates this system. It creates in a way that you don't need to, let's say, submit your identity for the sake of getting more efficiency. It's a very soft way of stepping in. And at the end of the day, you have a absolutely comfortable situation where you can decide what's the level of participation you're feeling comfortable with. And it's more like a trade-off between your participation versus the level of efficiency you can gain from the open system. So I think there is a great potential, and I'll be more than happy to answer your questions, but I'm pretty much sure that there is a very great starting point, and looking at the number of people who gathered here, I'm pretty much sure that it can be easily, between the stages 1 and 3, there is not so much gap in terms of time frame. So it can convert not from 1 to 2 and then to 3. It can be just 1 to 3, pretty easy and quick.
It's my belief, no one's ever challenged me on this, that I was the first person at Salesforce to have the word platform in my job title. Because when I joined the company, it had spent 10 years rehabilitating the image of customer relationship management from a record-keeping tool to a performance improvement tool. And then based on a conversation I had in 2004 with Mark Benioff, they were beginning to ask the question about what if we took that lid off the top and let people have access to all the underlying facilities that we use to build that next generation of CRM, so that they could build the next generation of whatever they want to do. And we would say to people, we want you to be the Salesforce of your industry. And that notion of opening up the ingredients, opening the pantry, as it were, rather than just offering the menu of the prepared dishes, is the distinction between having a portfolio of products, which many companies call their platform, and actually having a platform. A product has customers, buyers, and users. A platform has developers and co-creators and a community. And there was a comment that I think Tim made just a moment ago about, well, what's the point of technology if it just makes everybody the same? The use of a product has a homogenizing effect. The availability of a platform creates a differentiation opportunity, but you have to choose to use it that way. It wasn't my plan to use a lot of slides, but there is an image that I have found is sometimes effective in getting this across, which is that if you take everything you know and say, well, now we're going to migrate that into some new environment, you're very much at risk of putting wings and jet engines on a boat and calling it an airline. You'll be dragging with you a tremendous amount of things that you only had because your old environment required them. And you'll find yourself not really taking full advantage of what you could be because you looked at it through the lens of your technology. And if you can manage to unwind and say, wait a minute, what's the purpose for which we were created? And are we serving that purpose, or are we administering our technology? That's a good warning sign that you're doing it wrong. This is not the use of a platform. This is. It's conceived from the beginning for scale, for efficiency, for ability to be extended. You can take one of these platforms and turn it into a cargo transport, a luxury passenger transport, a water tanker to put out fires. It can be applied to many different roles, but it begins from an organizing vision of scalability, efficiency, a coherent design integrity, instead of something that tries to take what's familiar and migrate it into some new environment. So that's one of the first things that I try to share with customers is how to tell when you're not doing it, how to tell when what you're doing is a technology adoption rather than a platformization. I had this conversation, oddly, with someone in agribusiness who was saying, Peter, you guys at Salesforce, you're always talking about how to make things more social and engaging, but I sell fertilizer. And my response to him is, you don't. You deliver bags of fertilizer. no one has ever wanted to own a bag of fertilizer. What they were buying from you was profitability of their land. And once you realize that that's the actual thing you're selling, now you start to say, well, what could I be a platform to enable greater land profitability? And now you say, well, wait a minute, fertilizer is a means to an end. You fly drones over a field to figure out where the fertilizer needs to go and what the timing should be of the harvesting. And my fertilizer vendor customer said, but I don't do that. I said, no, but partners can do that for you under the aegis of your brand. And now your brand is not competing for the opportunity to sell a bag of ammonium nitrate at a competitive price. Now your brand is a transformational partner to someone with a need, orchestrating services and making them available. That's when platform dynamics start to come into play, because now you have people coming to you and saying, hey, I've got this service. You already have the relationship with the community that would need that service. Can I build on your platform? Can I become part of your platform? And that's a positive feedback loop. Bill Joy at Sun once said that the Joy's law is that no matter who you are, most of the world's smartest people work for somebody else. So what you want to do is create a platform, because then all the smart people want to come and add value to you, and they want to be laborers in your vineyard. And that is a sharing point of view rather than a zero-sum competition point of view. It's not you versus other platforms, because that's not the right way to be thinking about it. That's not thinking in terms of your customers' success. If you're continually asking, what are people needing before, during, and after they use the thing that I think I sell, and then you look at that before, during, and after and say, well, if I'm not doing that, should I be creating that? Should I be acquiring that? Should I be partnering with that? And now you start really having a needs-based discussion. This is where I think the credit union sector has an opportunity, and we were talking about this in the breakout group before, to be genuinely differentiating, because what the credit union proposition represents is a presence in and a participation in a community that is really not what's being sold by the big name banking brands against which credit unions might think they're competing. You don't really want to be competing to do what they do. You want to be positioning yourself as the place you go to get what you don't get from them. And we were having this conversation about when someone moves into a community, they should be asking questions like, where's the post office? Where's the library? Where's the credit union? You want them to come into a new place where they're going to live and say, well, I'm going to need a credit union. Which one do I want to be shopping in? If you can get that mindset in their minds, where you're the platform they'll use to set up their business. You're the platform they'll use to fund their home improvement and their children's education. You are the platform for your customer, is a way to become part of their lives in a way that's really powerful and induces a lot of loyalty. In the conversations around this event, just to encapsulate this, I've heard the word platform used in several very interesting ways, almost as if people are saying, well, platforms are being inflicted on us. The world is being taken over by these platforms. There's a germ of truth in that, and I want to talk about that in a moment. Then there's platforms we want to consume. I want to market on a platform. I want to use social media platforms as a new tool for engagement. Okay, platforms inflicted, platforms consumed, platforms constructed. Are you going to modernize your entire portfolio of administrative, record-keeping, regulatory compliance to take advantage of some of these new technologies and consume and build upon them? Or are you going to take the really big leap and turn yourself into a platform and ask yourself, what do I need to offer people so that they can build upon me and create their own definition of value? Most of us aren't hired, paid, or promoted for doing that. We're hired, paid, and promoted to improve the operating metrics of our business. We wind up being very inward looking and letting technology lead us to build bigger, faster, stronger silos. And no customer actually wants that. What they want is to have their new car, to have their kids' education, to have their renovated home, to have their new business. And as long as we're always focusing on that outcome, we'll look for ways to have co-creation value. Last thing I want to say, The word technology is an interesting word. And again, someone was saying, well, the problem with technology is that it leads you to a certain thing. Isn't it interesting the word technology has an ology at the end, implying that it's a study of something, even though we use the word technology as if it describes stuff, as if it describes pieces of hardware or software. If you want an example of technology, look at an adult ape teaching its child to fish for ants in an anthill with a stick. It's a stick. And yet, when people have tried to imitate that action without being taught by an adult ape who's a master of it, they discover it's a lot harder than it looks. The transfer of knowledge in a way that creates new value is what technology really is. And if you're having conversations about the value you're creating rather than the technology you're deploying, you're probably doing it right. As someone said last week, if we're talking about the boat, the system's not working, and last week we were talking about the boat. We're not supposed to have to talk about the boat. Things are just supposed to show up. And if you're talking about the technology, then you're talking about the color of your running shoes instead of talking about your plan for winning the marathon.